Think about American national holidays, Independence Day, Thanksgiving, Memorial Day, President's Day, Martin Luther King. What do they all have in common? They commemorate events or people. And similarly with Jewish holidays, think of the ones coming up: Sukkot, Simchat Torah, Hanukkah, Purim, Passover. They all commemorate events as well. And yet, the holiest day of the Jewish year neither commemorates an event or a person. The high holiday period, starting with Rosh Hashanah and ending with Yom Kippur, are days when we commit ourselves to God and reflect on how we can improve the way we act. That the holiest day of the Jewish year, Yom Kippur, is devoted to this is an extraordinary statement about what Judaism holds as most important. We're to ask ourselves, if God blesses me with another year, how will I live my life? And so it is character that I want to speak with you about this evening. Thoughts on how we can become better people in the coming year. I'll call it the 6 commandments of character. And each of them are grounded in Jewish teachings. The first commandment of character is to put character at the top of your agenda. Before you do something, simply ask yourself the following question: will what I'm about to do elevate my character or lower it? And if it will lower your character, then think twice before doing it. By simply asking that question, will this act raise or lower my character? That alone can be life-altering because it places character at the center stage in our lives. And this, by the way, is not only about the big decisions we make, it's also about those things that have seemingly little significance. We learned this from Maimonides, who taught us that the world was balanced between the good and the bad, and that every act that we would do impacts that balance. Small, seemingly insignificant acts take down society just a notch, and when they're done with enough frequency, they become acceptable behavior. You know, I've always thought that driving was a very good barometer of testing a society because it's completely anonymous. It's a great measure. So little things, like you're waiting at a slow interchange on the freeway, and another car comes zipping by only to cut in at the last moment. Those kinds of things lower our character. Or when you're waiting in line at the movie theater, and it says, adult tickets $15, children 12 and under, $13. And you're with your little one, and you walk up to the ticket taker, and you say, your child is, say, 14 years old, you say, 1 adult and 1 child. Now, you saved $3, but your child has watched you tell an untruth. And even if you do it online, even if your child doesn't see, you will think less of yourself. Asking ourselves, will this elevate our character or will it lower me, from the way we conduct business to the words that we use, helps keep character at the top of our agenda. Which leads me to the second commandment of character: know that whatever you do is known to God. It's one of the central tenets of Judaism that we answer to something higher, that we answer to God. When no one else is around, when no one else is looking, when no one else knows, God knows, and we're held accountable. We just beat our chest and we confessed for sins, but we did it out loud. We don't do that for God. God knows them already. God has a very good memory. We do it for us so that we're reminded of what we have done, where we fell short, and we hold ourselves accountable. Yes, of course, God knows our sins. God knows all the bad things we've done, but also God knows all the good things we've done. All the good acts, the time that we went out of our way for a coworker, and the coworker never knew it. The words that you chose not to speak out of anger or out of resentment. Your gifts to charity. None of the things we do fall into a vacuum. The bad and the good are known to God. And this should give all of us, it should be a source of strength to all of us, to know that even no one's looking, God knows when you've done something kind. Speaking about God, I literally heard this morning, kind of a cute story about two brothers who are always getting in trouble. And they're young men, and recently they're even accused of taking things that don't belong to them. Well, one of them is about, see if I can remember this correctly, about to become a bar mitzvah. And the week before he becomes bar mitzvah, he's meeting with the rabbi. And in the midst of the discussion, the rabbi starts talking with him about God and asks the boy, "So, young man, where is God?" And the boy starts trembling, and he immediately runs out of the office, and he runs home to find his little brother. His little brother has no idea of what's going on, but he sees the look of fear in his older brother's face, and he says, "What is it? What did the rabbi say to you?" And the older boy says, "Oh no, now God is missing, and they think we've got him." The third commandment of character, make Judaism your moral code. Each of us should ask ourselves, what is our moral code? Think about it just for a moment. How would you answer that question? I have a sense that for many very well-intentioned people, if we're honest, the answer is something like, well, I give thought to issues that come up. I give serious thought to it, but I decide then what is right. My friends, that's not a moral code. That's how you or I feel about something. That's about following our heart. And it's often what we tell our children or our grandchildren. Just follow your heart. In the eyes of Judaism, our hearts, our inclinations, our desires aren't always so terrific. If our hearts were so good, if we were so good by nature, why would we have been given 613 commandments to shape our behavior? If we were so good by nature, we wouldn't have to teach our children right from wrong. We wouldn't have to teach our children values. They could just follow their hearts. In fact, the tradition teaches us exactly the opposite. And I know that that's surprising to a lot of people, but it teaches us specifically not to follow our hearts. That's the reason, by the way, that we wear this talit. We're supposed to look at the fringes. Why do we wear the fringes? This is from the words of the Torah, so that we will, quote, remember all of the commandments of God and do them, and that you will not go after your own heart and your own eyes that lead you astray. We're supposed to look at the fringes of the talit and remember to do the commandments and not follow our heart. Of course, there are times when our hearts can lead us to good, but there are other times that we have to overcome our heart's desires. The Torah simply does not want our heart to be our moral compass. The Jewish moral code is the Torah, the Talmud, and thousands of years of Jewish teachings, which is why it's so important that we study, because only if we study will we know our moral code. Then when it comes to deciding right from wrong, or for guidance on personal issues, how to raise our children, how to conduct business, the way we eat, how we mourn, questions of prolonging life, or even shaping our outlook on bigger societal issues such as capital punishment or abortion, then we'll have the benefit of our tradition to shape our ideals. We need a moral code, and we were given one at Mount Sinai 3,200 years ago. It's called Judaism, and it's up to us to embrace it. Which leads me to the fourth commandment of character: develop humility and gratitude. Do you know the only adjective in the Torah that is used to describe Moses? It says of Moses that he was the most humble man on earth. You may have a talent for writing, for your profession, or academics. If you've had success in life, there's a very good chance you worked hard for it. You may have a winning personality. Take pride in your accomplishments, but the key is to realize that any accomplishment or talent that you have is a gift from God. Remember that gift came from somewhere, and you will stay humble. And similarly with gratitude, of course we should appreciate what we have. You know, it's not only a key to character, it's a key to happiness. If we don't appreciate what we have in life, we won't be happy. If we're not grateful for our good health, for our freedoms, for the loving relationships, we won't be happy if we don't appreciate them. But there are other less obvious things that also require gratitude. For example, if you received something good from another person and the relationship soured, don't diminish the person and the good that they once did for you. If you were married and the marriage ended, try to remember there were times that the relationship with your ex-husband or your ex-wife was good. If you're a child and your relationship with your mother or your father has soured, don't allow that to diminish the good that they did for you. There are children who do not speak to their parents. I'll bet many of you in this room know families in that situation. If you're a child who doesn't speak to his mother or father, consider this time of year to reach out, to make the call, whether you're a son or a daughter. I recognize there are justified exceptions to this, but my hope is that they are very rare. Don't diminish the good they did for you. It's no secret that we are living in particularly polarized times in our country. Those who differ politically don't always communicate with one another, and when they do, they don't always speak with respect or civility. It was the subject of a lot of sermons last year among rabbis, and I suspect it will be this year as well. There's a lot to be said on this issue. I simply want to offer one suggestion which I think may be particularly pertinent. When it comes to those with whom you differ, on the right or on the left, don't demonize them. Disagree with them, but don't demonize them. Assume that the person with whom you differ on either political issues or societal issues is as decent and well as intentioned as you are. Don't conclude that those who you disagree with are doing so because they're selfish or they're motivated by greed or any bad motive. Because if you do that, you'll demonize them and you'll ascribe everything that they say to negative intent. It's far better to conclude that they're wrong or perhaps misguided or perhaps even foolish, but not of bad intent. That alone, perhaps, may go a long way to restoring some civility. So disagree, but don't demonize. And stay humble and cultivate gratitude. Which leads me to the fifth commandment: have moral courage. Do you know the phrase that God says more than any other phrase in the Bible? I never would have guessed it. It's al tira, do not fear. God says it to Abraham, God says it to Isaac, and God says it to Jacob. In total, over 80 times to our ancestors. Why, of all phrases, does God repeat that one phrase so often? Alan Paton wrote a novel about South Africa. It's called Awe, But Your Land is Beautiful. And he has in it a heroic character named Robert Mansfield. And Mansfield takes a very strong stand against apartheid. In the novel, Mansfield is asked if he's worried about the consequences of his position. And he replies, referring to heaven, "When I get up there, which is my intention, the Holy One will say to me, 'Where are your wounds?' And if I say, I haven't any, he will say, was there nothing worth fighting for? Every one of us needs to ask ourselves that question. Where are my wounds? Are we willing to take a hit in life? Courage is undoubtedly the rarest of good human traits. It's among the most difficult to achieve, and I think I know why, because it conflicts with a powerful human desire, the desire to be liked and loved. It takes moral courage to take positions that are not popular, especially in your own community. It doesn't take a lot of courage to take things that people all agree with in your community, because if you take unpopular positions, that takes courage. And you know what happens? Some people may like you less, and some people may get angry with you, and some people may even choose to hurt you in some way, and you'll get wounded. But you may also do some good. Almost nothing good in our world happens without moral courage. Churchill said, courage is rightly considered to be the foremost of virtues because upon it all others depend. You know, sometimes when someone's being laid to rest at a funeral, we'll hear things like, I never heard anybody say a negative word about him or her. I value that sentiment. But if you stand for something, people indeed may say negative things. And that's okay. And that's, by the way, why I believe God repeats the words, Al Tira, do not fear, more than any other phrase to our ancestors. Not only to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, but to Moses, to Joshua, to Jeremiah, to Ezekiel. I think God realizes that it needs to be repeated to every generation again and again. And now God is saying it to every one of us. Al Tira, do not fear, have moral courage. Because for good to triumph, it takes men and women of moral courage with a willingness at times to be wounded. And the sixth commandment of character, elevate your words. Avoid gossip and avoid saying unnecessary negative things. You know, one of the most powerful weapons that we all have is our tongue. The debate about freedom of speech is alive and well in our country, but Judaism talks about something very different. Judaism talks about the responsibility in speech, what is called lashon hara, negative talk, gossip. And there are a myriad of laws about this in Judaism, about the way we use our words. There's a beautiful book called Words That Hurt, Words That Heal, written by a man named Rabbi Joseph Tolushkin. And you'll find some of the teachings I'm about to share with you in that book. So if you want a great book, that's a very good one on the subject. My friends, unless, God forbid, you have been the victim of a violent crime in your life, chances are that the greatest pain that has been caused in your life has been as a result of words that have been used thoughtlessly or cruelly. But it also means the chances are the greatest pain we have caused others is as a result of the use of words that we have done in a thoughtless or cruel way. So here's the general rule of thumb. Do not say anything negative about another human being, even if it's true, unless the listener has a genuine need for the information. There is a time when information that's negative should be shared, when it's pertinent, when it's necessary. You know, actually, Jewish law says there's 2 times when you're required to share negative information, even if it's not solicited. The 2 times are if someone is about to go into a business relationship with another person, and you happen to know that that person is a bad character, you're obligated to tell the other person. And the other time is when someone may be becoming involved romantically with another person, and you know that person's of ill character. You have to know it, but if they are, we have an obligation to share that that person's of ill character. There's other times when it's appropriate also. So for example, let's say you're a university student and someone says, you know, asks you about another professor, about a professor, and says, is this professor good or not? You're allowed to respond that they're a good professor or not a good professor. Or if someone asks your opinion, for example, about the rabbi's sermon, you should be honest. And you should feel free to offer volumes of positive statements. The truth is, most of the time, when we share negative words, it's not necessary. You take, for example, you're driving home from a dinner gathering. You're in the car. We tend not to heap on adjectives of praise. Did you notice everything was perfect? Every piece of food was perfect. He or she was just dressed beautifully. It's not our nature. We tend to look for the negative. Most of the sins which we commit are through words. That's why in a traditional machzor, in a traditional high holiday prayer book, when you look at the list of sins, there's one area that dominates: words. 30%, about 30%, a little more even, in a traditional high holiday machzor of the sins that are listed have to do with words. The first time I learned the laws of Lashon Hara, of gossip, I was sitting in a class, the teacher was teaching us, and on the way out, the teacher said to our class, I want you to go try to spend the next 24 hours without gossiping, without sharing negative information. And on the way out of the room, one of the other students said to me, what do you think of this teacher's assignment? And I immediately said, he's a fool. He always gives us ridiculous assignments. 24 hours? I went about 24 seconds. And then I started monitoring myself. And I found I wasn't delighted with the use of my words. And since then I have tried, not always successfully, but I've tried to not gossip too often. And by the way, I commend it to you. Try for the next 24 hours not to share unnecessary negative information. Maybe not on Yom Kippur. Do it the next day when you're not in synagogue all day. But try it. If you can't go 24 hours without a drink, you got a drinking issue. If you can't go 24 hours without cheesecake, you got an issue there. If you can't go without chocolate, actually that's not a good example that I think of. The truth is, I shouldn't talk about food tonight, but the truth is, if you can't go 24 hours without gossiping, you have a gossip issue. It's a great insight into someone's character. If they're not going to be gossiping much, it's a great insight into them. But you know something? If they're willing to gossip to you about other people, there's a good chance they're willing to gossip about you to other people as well. It's great to have a home in which your children know we try to avoid gossip at the dinner table. You know, the more I study our tradition, the more I appreciate the centrality of its teachings on character and on holiness. Our religion seems to have two central goals: to elevate our character and to bring us closer to God. And when I first started preparing this sermon, I got to tell you, I came up with a list of over 30 ways to develop character. We can take great pride that character is so important in Judaism. This is Yom Kippur, and I hope by the time the shofar is blown tomorrow night, after Ne'ilah, when the sun goes down, that you really will feel a sense of renewal and of optimism as we enter the new year. The truth is, we all stumble during the year. We all fall short of becoming the kind of person we want to be. You know that Judaism actually gives us a way of seeing each day as a new beginning, a fresh start to elevate our character. So before I conclude, I want to share the way that Judaism helps us to do just that. Many of you know that it's a tradition that soon after you wake up in the morning, you say Shema Yisrael, right? You say the Shema. And you may also know that it's a tradition that you say it before you go to sleep at night. What you may not be as familiar with is that the tradition of saying these words before you say the Shema at night. God of the universe, I forgive anyone who has angered or antagonized me or sinned against me, whether against my body, my property, my honor, or anything of mine, whether accidentally, willfully, carelessly, or purposefully, whether through speech, deed, thought, or notion, in this incarnation or in any other, I forgive everyone. May no one be punished because of me. May it be your will, Adonai my God and the God of my ancestors, that I may sin no more. Whatever sins I have done before you, may they be cleansed in your abundant mercy, good health, and safety. And it concludes, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, God, my rock and my redeemer. And you conclude with, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. If you think saying those words before you go to sleep at night will help you wake up in the morning with a positive beginning, and you'd like to say them before you go to sleep, we have copies of that prayer available for you as you leave. And I hope you'll put it by your bedside and think about saying those words before you turn out the lights. In the coming year, may we each put character at the top of our agenda. May we believe that our actions, good and bad, are known to God. May we make Judaism our moral code. And may we develop greater humility and gratitude. And may we each have moral courage and elevate our words. My friends, if we see these high holidays as a spiritual and moral highway, a celestial highway, if you will, towards elevating our character, then we become better, our families and our relationships become stronger, the ideals of our society become greater, and ultimately, our nation and our world become a better place. But it starts with us as individuals on this holiest day of the year. May this year, 5778, be a year of harmony in our world. May our country prosper and be a source of goodness. And may Israel and her neighbors find peace. Indeed, may Israel soar. And to each of you, as we thank God for the year gone by, I pray that we are all sealed in the book of life for the year to come. May it be a year of good health, of loving relationships, and may this gem of Judaism and the presence of God fill our lives with blessings, not only for ourselves, but for all those whom we love. Amen.